Hey, ladies, welcome to The Power of the Ask, the podcast where we ditch the waiting and embrace the asking for what we truly deserve.
Welcome to The Power of the Ask.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Power of the Ask podcast, which helps you get what you need financially and personally. We are so glad that you're here today. My name is Lisa Zeiderman. I am managing partner at Miller Zeiderman, and I am one of the co-hosts with my dear friend, Precious Williams. Hello, Precious.
Thank you, Queen Lisa. My name is Precious Williams. I'm the proud founder and CEO of the Perfect Pitch Group and also affectionately known as the Killer Pitch Master. Welcome back, welcome back, welcome back. This week, we're excited to reintroduce you to Nirupa Umapathy. We're so excited to have her again. And so I'm just going to give you a little tea on her before she introduces herself and we get the Power of the Ask podcast going. Nirupa Umapathy is an independent SG-focused investor, writer, facilitator, and classical Pilates teacher. I'm going to need a little of that. A former managing director at Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, and White Box Advisors, she was known for executing complex deals in structured credit markets. After leaving finance in 2017, she redesigned her life around joy and creativity. Nirupa founded Salons for Life, a community fostering connections through unstructured play and writes on empowered transitions. She also curates a unique alternatives portfolio, drawing on her financial expertise. Nirupa holds a BA in anthropology and economics from Smith College. It is such a pleasure to have you here with us again, Nirupa. Why don't you share with the audience a little bit more about Salons for Life, what it is, and what led you here today?
Hi, Precious. So good to see you. And hi, Lisa. Such a delight. Thank you so much for having me here.
Delighted to have you.
Yeah, I don't know, just maybe like 5 months since we spoke last, and we were speaking at a very critical time back then. And I feel like the time has gotten more critical since the last time we spoke. Great question on Salons for Life. It is a joy project that I founded in April of 2018 in earnest. And as your introduction so succinctly described, it's really a learning community for adults, a learning and a storytelling community for adults, where we engage in anywhere from 90 minutes to 3 to 5 hours of immersive, all I can say is living room type conversations with a purpose. And the reason why I don't call it a company, I don't call Salons for Life a company, is because we did not incorporate as actually an LLC until very recently. We were originally 3 co-founders, and one of our co-founders, Kate, who will always be a founder emeritus because that's the way we do companies in Salons for Life. She went on to doing bigger and better things with her acting career, and she had to start her own production company. And so it's a two-legged stool, which sounds very imbalanced, but we do balance each other really well. It's my friend Sybil, who I met at the yoga studio in 2019, and it was friendship at first sight. And so Sybil and I continue on into the next leg of this journey for salons. And what I will say in a one sentence elevator pitch back then, which doesn't apply anymore, is that it was actually built on a fairly radical mission, which was the power to gather and the right to gather is inherently the fundamental tenet of democracy. And while I never advertised it in any of our pitch materials, that had always been the founding tenet of salons, and it was based off, the inspiration was the French Enlightenment salons of the 19th century, which were really the backbone of the, not only the French Revolution, but it was a republic of letters in many ways. And why was that the inspiration? Because it was a uniquely women-driven movement. Women gathered philosophers, thinkers, writers, and philosophes, as they called it, in the living room and made that a real-life university. Now, that was the first generation of the salons. And we attempted to do the same thing with it for the last, from April 2018 to the last salon was November 2024. So we ended the chapter there, where essentially there was a huge cornerstone around learning through the community. So it was a very shared hierarchy No one was the expert. And we learned, when I say we learned, we did experiential learning. So it was somatic. It was financial acuity, which I know we will talk a lot about. And it was about creative capital. So actually, it's what I call the three currencies. And for me, actually, the three currencies have been the power to my own journey of liberation, if you will. And if I may just add one more point, because I don't want to leave it hanging there, the new chapter of the salons is going to look like experiential retreats building on the three currencies. So we will go from doing micro events, which were 2 to 4 hours long, to now we'll go to like 2 to 4 day retreats or 2 to 3 day retreats. Yeah.
Wow.
But the curriculum is going to be the same, basically. Creative capital, somatic, and Lisa, I don't know about financial acuity, and I need to talk to you about this offline because it just teaching personal finance in a retreat also feels so loaded with liability in the US market. So I'm still like thinking through it.
It is all about being careful about liability, I would say.
Yes.
It's always good to keep that in mind.
Exactly. I knew I'd have to talk to you as a lawyer for like liability discussions. But the reason I bring it up, Precious, is because I never really looked at the salons as a business model or a money-making project. It was truly a love project for me. We always broke even, meaning we always paid our artists a very fair trade wage. But the founders necessarily, Sybil and I weren't in it to pay for our living wages, if you will. And we can talk about it more because I know the conversation is going to unfold in this direction anyway.
All right. So, Nirupa, we saw you, like 6 months ago. We had this great conversation on the power of the ask, of course. And here's my question. What key insights, shifts, changes have influenced your approach since you were last on with us to your leadership, to decision making, to even finding your joy? Because this for you has been a lot about finding your joy. Your journey has been about finding your joy.
Yeah, I mean, great question, Lisa. I actually had to reflect on this question a bit because I literally feel like we've traveled from one planet to the next since we last spoke, to be honest. And what joy means to each one of us at a moment in time can probably be hour by hour, day by day. You know what I mean? It's so case by case. Um, in terms of my joy vitamins, what I would say is I haven't changed my opinion on this, which is community is queen. And the power of your company, and by this I mean the people that surround you, is very essential at this time of great chaos and polarization and divide and conquer, as I like to call it. That's one. I haven't changed my view on being a mission-based founder of things. What I mean by that is, Lisa, I don't have any plans on returning back to Wall Street anytime soon. I don't even know if I'll be employable, but you know what I mean. Even theoretically speaking, to go back to an explicit for-profit model as an employee. So that has not changed. My thesis still remains. What has changed, and I know that we will talk about this here, which is as much as I think out of the last 7 years, to give you perspective, 5 of the years I was pro bono, and only 2 years I got paid. As much as I think my setup in life allowed for me to do that, it actually ended up burning me out massively. And I intend to do a complete 180 on that in the next chapter. So let me draw a parallel with the salons. The first phase of evolution for the salons in the beginning was just testing out a product and a prototype and understanding who we were serving. So that was really something where we just did it on the kindness of all the collaborators. Like we weren't paying anyone anything. And people just showed up because they wanted to be part of the project. They just loved it. And so we continued on like that for a year. The second year, we basically, Sybil and I made a decision that we're going to pay the artists first because artists don't get paid a fair living wage in the US, and we wanted to support them. So the second year, what we started doing was every time we would have like this kitchen sink community, every event we passed through everything that we were raising from the community. It was extremely accessible, meaning anyone could walk in. You didn't have the money to pay for it. You come in free. If you wanted to donate, you paid. the sliding donation model. Then the third year, then this was the pandemic. And Sybil and I decided that we had no operating budget. Like Savvy Ladies is a ginormous operating budget. We were a tiny little scrappy organization, which is super grassroots, grown in living rooms, really, funded by its community, sweat equity of its community. We decided that we were going to raise money and donate all of it to community organizations. So that year, our focus was only on paying our artists and our facilitators and paying out to community organizations that were doing very important work. And then from there on, so that was very much still sort of whatever you raise, you just pass through. And then we shifted the model to breaking even where we had comfortable margins, meaning we had a reserve. We didn't have to freak out if we didn't have, like, we always had 1 year's ramp worth of expenses, right? As much as it was all part of the plan, it still was exhausting emotionally. And here we are. I mean, both Sybil and I don't want to speak for her, I can tell for myself that I clearly wouldn't be doing these kinds of things if I knew that my retirement was at risk. My retirement was not at risk, but the cost of life living across New York City, literally, Lisa and Precious, because I was so committed to mission and doing good, I shortchanged myself so much that I was living like a first-year analyst associate at times. And I think the crash and burn happened last year when I woke up one day and I said, yes, I don't need to live a Wall Street lifestyle. Yes, I don't need to be in a red carpet experience all the time. Yes, I don't need to have a $300 meal to really satiate my soul. But I don't want to live like a first-year analyst or a second-year associate, because no offense to first-year analysts, there's a time and an age to do that. I'm 45 going on 46. I think that the time to do all of that was in my 20s, and I have experienced those times. And those are wonderful times for then, not now. So I think that this is the biggest takeaway, which is I really am moving into this next chapter. And I like to define chapters as 7 years because some weird astrological reason, my big time shifts are like 7 years. I don't know what it is. Everything happens in a multiple of 7 for me. And so like 7 years, the next 7 years, I'm moving to this theme called margin. I'm not calling it profit. I'm calling it margin, because profit is a really bastardized and diluted word at this point. And I'm half in with the capitalists of Wall Street because I'm an investor, but I'm half in with the artists and the culture workers who always like to vomit when they hear the word profit. So I like to use the word margin. Yeah, that's really the biggest leadership shift that will inform the way I do business with the world, but it'll also inform the way I'm inside out in my life.
Good for you.
I think what is so great about what you just said is I feel like that's the life of those who love what we do. And then, hey, you can make money from this. And then you start to shift in your mind. How do you really want to do this? How will this work out? And you talked about your 7 years, these 7-year cycles. I thought that was so brilliant how you said that, because that's how I feel like my life is these 7-year cycles. Along with that, we know in order for you to, get those into the salons of life, you have to make a compelling ask. You have to give them something valuable, something to sink their teeth into. So how do you leverage storytelling, your story or your co-founder's story, and data that you've come across to make a more compelling and persuasive ask, period?
I want to talk about the compelling ask in a couple of different contexts, because the first one is going to be the easiest one for me to describe to you. So when I worked for 14 years in finance, it is a notoriously transactional industry. What I mean by this is that if I actually didn't go in before bonus time and if I was not having that advocacy conversation with my manager, I really was shooting myself in the foot. So in a way, in Wall Street, when they say ask for the order, they literally mean it on the trading floor. Like, you ask for the order throughout the day, right? So essentially you pick up the phone and you talk to your client, and there's hopefully a trade at the end of it. There's also a huge part of relationship building when you work on the trading floor. But the immediate transactional thing, which actually was the beauty of working on the trading floor, that it was never shameful to do that. And the same way with salary and comp, the annual compensation cycle, at least in the trading floor, was at a certain time, like bonus pools were getting negotiated, and every desk had its own culture. It was very manager dependent. It was very personalities dependent, where there would be this sort of like lobbying and this negotiation that would go on for employees. Um, and each one of them was effectively having some kind of a veiled or not so veiled conversation around what they expected to get paid versus what the firm or the bank was going to pay them. And in that, the frame was again fairly reasonable in the sense most people, I would assume, if they were in VP and above in those careers, or maybe even younger now, but these younger generations probably had a very good sense of their comp in the market. Like they were calling headhunters whether you were looking to move or not. So basically, when you walk into a manager's door, you at least had an idea of where you were, right? I'm making $100 or $200 or $300, whatever it was. And then the very audacious and the shadow boxing or the dancing across the floor happens in the negotiation, where depending on the personality and the manager, again, you might start at like, I'm expecting 300 when the manager's a lowballer and they're at 100, or you know what I mean? Um, that was the cleanest environment where I learned to develop the power of the ask. It gets very squirrely after outside that for me, because remember, I moved from finance into the complete diametrically opposite, which is the arts, where I was working with artists who had a hard time asking. Like I literally had to be like, I think for this, you're going to be with us for 90 minutes. I think $250 is a fair trade honorarium. We can't afford to pay you more, but I think I've looked at your competitors and what they pay you. I think this is fair trade. Literally, it was so weird how the market was set in that case. Like someone who comes in and tells you, it's okay, don't pay me. And then you're like, no, I think we should pay you something for your 90 minutes. And then I'm like looking around being like, what will they get paid if they worked at the local theater company and they did some 90-minute, right? So setting the market was a very confusing time for me. The last 7 years have been the most confusing time for me. And I'm taking out the 2 years when I was working with a consulting company where I was back in corporate and it was all like back to like the way I knew it. Working with artists and with yoga teachers and cultural workers was one of the most enlightening, illuminating, heart expanding, mind expanding experiences, but also I walked away from it learning a lot, but I also walked away feeling like couldn't sustainably be part of it if I was not in a pool of people that were getting paid equitably, including myself and including my co-founder. Precious, to give you some perspective, in trading, one of the earliest tenets is like don't fish in an overcrowded market, and definitely don't be hunting in a market where the payoffs are terrible. And I did exactly all of that for the last 7 years. Basically, no one goes into the arts to get paid in America, at least. Like, I'm not talking about the expensive paintings that are hanging in the Guggenheims, right? I'm talking about independent artists that don't have a platform. I mean, I know you both can understand this. Like, I'm not talking about, I don't know, Lisa, can you give me like some fine art, like some like the most like contemporary artist
It's not John Chamberlain.
Exactly. It's not someone who's selling their work for like millions of dollars. We're talking about people that I was working with. It was a very conscious choice. They were making anywhere between 30 to 60, 70, $80,000 a year. And a lot of the artists at that time were living sort of in the tri-state area, even though I was working with artists globally. Um, I really learned a shit ton in the last 5 years, both of the expanded limits of our imagination and what the power of community can do. When you don't have the money, there's a bunch of other people that show up for you. That there is a universe that's a benevolent universe that does take care of people that are contributing in other ways. But I also learned the limits of when you are when you're low on gas, you're not going to be able to show up well to the world as well. And that was me personally. I'm not talking about any of my artist friends. Yeah.
So, okay, so here's the thing, Nirupa. You have certainly a huge acumen for financial literacy. I mean, that was what you spent your career actually building and enhancing, and then you chose to change your life
Hmm.
and to work with the art world, where frankly I think that there is less of an understanding of financial literacy.
Hmm.
I think that there is a definite different emphasis on what is important to an artist, and also how they are going to even market to your point, what they do. Okay. And I'm a pretty large art collector. I love
Yep.
art, as you know,
Yeah.
and a lot of unknown artists. But I always find that that's a very big difficulty for artists, is actually putting value
Yeah.
on the work. They either put way too much value because
Mm.
it's just frankly insane, or they don't put enough value. Right? That's the problem. Either way, it doesn't get them to where they want to go financially. And so now you are in essentially this art world, and the question is, does how are you able to use your financial literacy to ask for and effectively get the resources and the support that you need to achieve your financial goals? And has your financial goals changed? I mean, you talked about, I think, this cutoff for you where you won't give up your retirement safety net, right? That's your cutoff. But you obviously have cut out other parts of your life, right? That
Hasn't.
$300 meal may not be, what you are doing right now. So what are you doing to essentially get resources and support so that you can make sure that you are not actually sacrificing your retirement and perhaps your early retirement?
Great question. So again, for context, I think from a retirement standpoint, I'm good. Like meaning that was actually the base jumping decision. The minute I got confidence to the tune of 85% that my retirement is taken care of. Meaning at that time when I stepped off finance, I was 37, I think. Right. And my advisors ran a whole bunch of scenarios, but I also did some mental math on it because my advisors still were indexing to a cost of life of $120,000 a year or like 150. And I was very confident without any data actually that I was going to be able to live on 60. It was just a challenge that I took on. And that experiment worked well for 3 years. And then it all blew up because of where I live. And I still have a mortgage and I've not paid down the mortgage, not because I don't want to pay it down. Talking about financial literacy, I have a low interest rate of 3.125. It makes no sense to let go of like close to 25-year financing at 3.5%. So that's number one, which is we talk about this always, Lisa. Know your balance sheet, know the cost of your life, know the cost of your liabilities first. Always. Before your assets, know what is going to like pull you down, right? The second thing I would say is the cost of life volatility has been huge. I don't know about you or Precious. I was able to live comfortably on $50,000 to $60,000 from 2017 to even 2019, and I'm not talking about income
Hashtag
tax.
no lies detected. Hashtag no
Yeah,
lies
yeah.
detected. Agree.
Like, yeah,
Mhm.
exactly. I'm not talking about income taxes here, Lisa. Like, income taxes are a completely different beast, but that number includes property taxes. And I actually now, my property taxes, and since we like to talk numbers, I'll talk numbers. I don't have any shame around talking about numbers. A 2-bedroom apartment back then in Jersey City, my property taxes were 8 grand. Okay. Now, Jersey City is going through a fiscal crisis, and my property taxes in the last 5 years have gone to 19 grand. So if you can look at that drift and also from a relative value standpoint, it's a terrible proposition to actually for me to be living in Jersey City right now, because suddenly I've gone, even though I had a low mortgage rate, uh, maintenance has been okay and insurance has been okay, but property taxes are more than doubled, right? And it makes no sense. And it looks like there's no end in sight right now. And also Jersey City, and I'm sorry to like trash talk my own city, which I absolutely love. It's got one of the worst kind of schooling records as well. So from any which way you can look at it, like I can't justify why we are where we are, right? So that's the second point about my life experiment, what I've learned from, which is cost of life, which I modeled in 2017, and where my cost of life right now is. My cost of life right now is probably, and I live, as I told you, very scrappily, except when I travel. That's a very deliberate choice. When I travel, I mostly travel with my parents now. We're old, so I have to make sure that their needs are taken care of. And I will live like a complete cheapskate for the time that I'm in the US. But when I travel like a queen. I travel both ways. Like I travel very scrappily, but I also travel like a queen, right? And the cost of life volatility has gone from 50 to 85. Okay. And for you, by absolute numbers, that probably is nothing. But if you look at it on a percentage basis, I'm almost approaching close to twice the cost of life. And that's where we're going with the US right now with inflation. We talked about how food inflation is untenable before we started this call, right? And I'm talking about, and so the real decision that I'm actually, for the first time, the tail is wagging the dog for me, which is the cost of life is actually influencing my decision on where I choose to invest my time and my place and my community and my relationships in. And that's one aspect about financial literacy 101, right? Be very mindful of the cost of life and and we talk about this, Lisa, have a very good handle on what your cost of life is every year. And how many people do you think really know what their life really costs every year?
Like very few, because I see that every day. Very
Right?
few. It's the first question I asked during a consultation. What's the burn rate? And
Exactly.
nobody knows the answer.
I know. And in your divorce, like negotiations, like how are they like negotiating coming in thinking what the replacement cost is going to be, right? Exactly. Right. I always tell my friends there's a lot of people that have come to me asking me about how do you transition from this to this. And I always tell them that it depends on the financial load and how financially flabby you are. And what I mean by this, I'm so sorry. This is not a body shaming comment at all, because this is a very neutral comment. What I mean by financial flab is A, do you have any idea of what your expenses are, which is the burn rate that Lisa referred to? B, what is the cost of your debt? So many people do not understand and don't know what their APRs and their credit cards are, and yet they're maxing out credit cards. And again, I'm not shaming anyone. I'm just saying something here. Because we all are in a journey. And what are your student loan rates? What is this? What is the weighted average? Blah, 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 right? Now, all of this, Lisa, frankly, like Wall Street didn't teach me this, because I was working with institutional investors. I wasn't dealing with personal finance literacy. Frankly, I was a terrible personal finance person when I was earning all that money, because I didn't have to. I could throw money at everything. Right? Just throw money at it. Like, whatever, and it was only when I stopped earning money actively and I was earning money only through dividends and income and really like eating my own humble pie financially in the last like 7 years, I really had to enforce a huge amount of discipline in this side of the balance sheet and this side of the income statement. I never looked at expenses when I was earning money as a W-2. I didn't have to.
Exactly.
You earn and then you spend. And of course, I was saving a lot because Wall Street at that time, and it probably still is, was a very high income industry that we were saving in leaps and bounds above market norms, right? I don't know I'm sorry, I don't want to meander too much, but I can talk about the asset side in another part of this conversation. But I think until you have a good handle on this, because this you can actually control. The markets, you can't control. Your asset growth, really, at the end of the day, like growth in that sense, you really can't control. You can play well, but you can't control the outcomes. But how much you spend on your life? Oh, yeah, you can control.
Ladies, are you ready to take control of your future? Do you dream of financial stability, freedom, and a life that truly deserves you?
For over 20 years, Savvy Ladies has empowered women from all walks of life to make smart financial choices, achieve our goals, and build a brighter future.
We built Savvy Ladies as a community of women supporting women. We offer free financial educational programs, a trusted helpline, and guidance and advice from America's top financial professionals.
You can access the financial helpline at savvyladies.org or where you get your apps under Savvy Ladies. Savvy Ladies equips you with the knowledge, confidence, and support you need to thrive. So don't wait. Join Savvy Ladies today and start building your financial confidence and well-being now.
I am loving where you're taking this conversation. And I also know that in your life, just in our lives together, we've heard the word no. And for most people, that's the stop.
Yeah.
But can the word no actually be a powerful tool for growth and redirection? And have you ever had a rejection turn into an unexpected opportunity?
Okay. First off, as someone who's aspiring to be a published writer, hopefully at some point I will be published. Who knows when? But you are in the game of rejections. The odds of the writing market are such that you're literally like negative odds. Literally. Right. Besides artists, writers are in an even crazier spectrum, which is I have no idea why we wake up every morning and do what we do. If you were to just look at the odds of just being rejected in the mainstream publishing market, we will never wake up. So my rejection immunity from the last 7 years of just being a writer is like in the, I don't know, astrosphere somewhere, like so much better with rejections right now. I was very frail despite working in a very sort of demanding and tough industry. I mean, finance definitely made me Teflon, but it was also an industry where you couldn't fail. If you failed in the trading floor, you lost money and you were fired. So that was not an option in my old job. Um, your client breaking up with you was a bad failure. If your client let you go, it's not looking good for you. Okay. So finance did not actually train me in how to fail. It wasn't safe to fail in finance, at least the way I knew it. I've learned to fail in the last 7 years. But the thing about rejection and the no's, one of the most beautiful stories I can think of is in somewhere in the middle of my career, in my 14 years, somewhere there in my sixth year or the fifth year or seventh year, my timelines are all off right now. I was so unhappy in my job where I was in this investment bank. And being the sort of overly confident spring chicken that I was then in the middle of my career, I was like, I'm just going to go and show them that I can find a job elsewhere. And like, I had this headhunter had set up an interview for me, and it was at Goldman Sachs. And um, I went for the interview, and something happened where there were two interviews. The first interview was with someone, it went okay. And the second interview was the main interview, and the person was not able to interview me. And as a result of which, I never ended up meeting this person, and I didn't get the job either. And look at it like 3 or 4 years later, I think my timeline is completely off, but let's just go with this. 4 years later, this woman ends up becoming my boss. She actually was hired in to the last investment bank that I worked in. And literally, for me, she was probably the best boss of my career. What I mean by that is this woman single-handedly, I think within a year of taking on this new team, she was walking into a new investment bank. She was running this new group, new mandate, everything. Everything was new, and she looks at me and she didn't know me from Adam. She probably read my production numbers and she probably knew that I was a top producer, but she didn't know anything about me. And as she says, and like after our first ever meeting where the group is meeting her, I bump into her somewhere and she's like, she looks at me straight and she said that we'll work on getting you promoted. No one does that. Like that kind of like placing a bet on someone and with that kind of conviction and sharpness and then sticking to it, Needless to say, I owe a huge debt of gratitude to this woman that'll always be in my life. And she ended up being my last manager. And I call her my last manager because she was the person to whom I resigned to when I ended in the investment bank. So that was an example of when an implicit rejection, meaning she didn't get to interview me many years ago. And I'm so glad that she didn't, because that product, I wouldn't have even known what to do with it. She was in a very different product. And then to come and lead this team, and my career thrived and flourished under her. It was like, what is a great example, I think, of, I don't know, a rejection that turned into something beautiful, like a blooming flower in some garden, you know?
Nirupa, so I'm going to ask you something in terms of timing. When it comes to making the ask, how important is the timing? And how do you recognize the right moment? And I'm going to tie it to something.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So my husband and I always talk about luck versus good fortune.
Mm.
And people often say, I'm very lucky, or you're very lucky, or we always say it's good fortune because it wasn't luck. It didn't just happen, right? We made it happen. And I think about that when I'm asking you about timing, because I think that I see it certainly in the courtroom, that timing is really everything. When you're going to state something, when you're going to hold back, when you're going to wait for the other person to make their argument, all of those things, right? It's a strategy. Very often I'll have somebody with me, another partner or associate, and they'll be writing something and they'll say, to tell me to say this. And I'm like, no, not yet. Right. Okay. And it's all about the strategy of timing. And I am, and how do you know when the right moment is? How do you recognize the right moment to make your ask? And you made your ask every day, according to you. So how'd you do it?
Well, so on the trading floor, I mean, the context, let's just say it is with comp cycles, there was a cadence, you kind of knew it. You didn't want to start this conversation too early. Let's say that bonuses got paid in January, February. I don't know when they are paid now. I don't remember now, but you don't want to start the conversation in September. I mean, like in May, because then they're going to call you needy, or they're going to call you completely clueless and out of tune, right? So there's a very tight window where you don't want to be outside of where your peers are having these advocacy conversations. That's one. But that is the direct ask. The indirect ask is always no ask. It's planting of seeds of how am I creating value for you? So if Lisa were my boss, this is the way it would play out. Like, yes, let's say that Lisa is paying me a bonus in January. I am going to be in Lisa's office in November or whenever after we need to have a very good sense of the timeline. When the partners have had their conversation, we know what the bonus pool is, blah, 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 we go in. But then there's two layers beneath that, which is advocating for my value and what I'm bringing to Lisa first as a boss, and then what I'm bringing to the partnership, which is a bigger strategic thing that you need to. And as an employee, if I were working for Lisa, my eye has to be on that price first any conversation. It's really, and this is something in writing as well, or in a presentation, Precious. You can it's about what is it in for me, stupid. I mean, that's really it's really that. It's really what is in it for Precious, what is in it for Lisa, right? So those conversations can be planted, those seeds can be planted indirectly without there being any ask. In fact, I would say don't ask throughout the year. You're just doing your internal branding. This is the storytelling. This is the adding value. And let's not be disingenuous about it. I mean, everything about what I do now is authentic, which is that I'm not asking you to put a plug in if your heart's not fully in it. So Lisa, I think that be very mindful of the direct ask and the timing, where the timing is very, like, it's finely tuned. But the indirect task can be something that comes from your own sense of calibration. And obviously, I'm not going to be asking Lisa for something as she's going into like some kind of high stressful like courtroom, like proceeding. I mean, that would be the worst timing to be asking Lisa for a bonus as I'm carrying a folder, right? Like, so yes. And I think also, Lisa, more than timing, I think it's really the most valuable skill here is to be able to read context and people call it read the room. I'm an anthropologist, but it's context. If Precious is going to be presenting at a keynote in Atlanta tomorrow and her flight is at like 4 in the morning, right? If I have that context, I'm not going to be yamming in her ear at 6 p.m. the previous day, even, to be honest.
Exactly.
Context.
It's reading that room. I 100% agree.
That and empathy, I think, to always put the other person first. Your needs will always be served. I think when you learn, because you are my client, Precious is my client, thinking of it as who's my client at that moment in time and putting yourself next. You are also your own client. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to make myself subservient to your needs, but a client facing, this is my salesperson coming out, which is know what the client needs, do what the client asks, but at the same time, always be able to, as a writer, I say that weave in the narrative of how your needs are not mutually exclusive from mine.
First of all, if that is not the best question in terms of timing, I wish more people thought like that. I really, really wish that they did. But also in terms of timing, when we think about financial empowerment and negotiation skills, in addition to timing, when we think about all of these together, it's still about the power of the ask. And how do you get there? So
Yeah.
for women and underrepresented groups, how do they kind of mesh that together?
Yeah.
The financial empowerment and negotiations, especially negotiation skills, because there are people who will say something to you,
Mm.
and you get the feeling they want you to say yes, and when you say, "I'm gonna do a counter offer," but most won't. So,
Mm.
how does that work?
Yes.
The great negotiation skills in financial empowerment and using the power of timing.
So interesting, Precious. I think I was so blessed to have worked on the trading floor. My entire job was to negotiate prices. I was basically the person in between the trader and the client. That negotiation was just something that just was so naturally inbuilt into me, functionally and professionally. But yet, I think even I failed many times negotiating for myself. I was not the first person standing outside my manager's room saying, "This is what I want to get paid." So I suffered and struggled with that a lot. I would, if I had to wager, I probably was number 10 if my other peers were like 1, 2, and 3. And I think I got a little bit better with it over time. The financial crisis, the '08 crisis, really dug the nails into the coffin on that one. People were not getting paid anything even before the financial crisis started where I was working. And Wall Street was a very bonus-based business at that time. Like the base salaries were not that high yet. Now the base salaries are much higher and they can be very comfortable living wages. But I worked during a time before the financial crisis where if you didn't get your bonus, you're not going to really make ends meet. And I remember the one time when the bank slashed and said no bonuses 1 year before, talking about timing, 1 year before the rest of the street was like pedaling down on bonuses. That was the first time I learned to go in and basically get a counter offer. And I went in and I said, "This is the offer. I'm going to leave." That was actually not a smart thing to do, but I did. I was young and I did it. And guess what? They matched the offer. I actually think back on that, and it honestly could have been played many different ways. I wouldn't recommend that it be done. But then 2 years later, it gave me the courage to go, and I was an employee in this bank and I was doing well. And I went, the next level of it was, I didn't say I want to get paid this. I was still too bashful to ask for that. Instead, I said, I will be very upset if I don't get paid this. So I floored the comp, and effectively that's what I got paid, right? So my point is, even though I worked in the business, I was actually not as good compared to a lot of the people that I thought that were really good. But then again, if you ask my second to last manager, he would say that I was a royal pain in the ass. So I probably was doing a good job negotiating with him, because I think I was the only person that you really had to like deal with this. And it was very annoying, I'm sure, for him, especially coming from this brown woman from India. I'm like, oh my God, there she is again asking. My point being, I didn't even though I worked in finance, I had to fumble my way through it. No one was coaching me on how to do this. I am able to tell people how to negotiate for salaries so much better for the last 7 years because I have that zoomed out perspective where the stakes, I'm not the person that I'm advocating for.
Mm-hmm.
I think, Lisa and Precious, I would be better. I don't play poker, but I'm using it as a metaphor. I would be so much better at sitting at a poker table and taking someone's money very comfortably because that is part of the game than if I again had to walk into your office, Lisa, and be like, Lisa, I demand that you pay me $1 million this year. I'm saying, like, I think that that will just not come out of my mouth the same way. And I know that I'm not offering a very clear solution to this question, but I want to lead from a place of empathy for all of us. Even the best negotiators, I think, struggle when they're negotiating for themselves. So a level of distance is needed. One, you have to de-risk the stakes for yourself. Second, you have to practice, and you can do this as scripts and role play with your friends or whoever is your best negotiation coach. It doesn't have to be a salary coach, by the way. It can actually be an artful negotiator. But going through that script like 4 times and then practicing in front of the mirror, being like, and then I'm able to embody it. I'm able to embody, I'm going to walk in, Lisa, I deserve $1 million. And not only that, I think that that is the baseline of what I think I should get paid. I should be getting paid more. For me to say that straight to you, Lisa, I think for me, it'll take a few iterations.
But I think that that is part of every ask that you make is that you have to think it out strategically and probably rehearse it. It
Many-
doesn't just come out. And if it's an important ask, you should be going through the rehearsal. I think that you need to actually go through the rehearsal and make sure that you've got essentially your pitch, and Precious knows this better than anyone, your pitch down, and that you can get yourself through all of the resistance that there may be to your ask. And
100%. And 100%. And also, once you do that, I can go and let's say that I work at the next firm. I'm not so attached to my boss. I'm very attached to Lisa. Loyalty is getting in the way of me asking. Next boss, I don't care. Guess what? It's going to be $1.5 million. I'm just making it up here, but you know what I mean?
right,
Or,
no.
or 350 versus like 500. I'm like, you know what? I'm not. Lisa is my mentor, my rabbi. She's been like taking care of me for the last 15 years. Oh God, I feel so terrible. I don't want to ask her. But then another person, I would actually be very good at it dispassionately. And Lisa, the other thing I want to say to Precious's question about women of color, I am obviously Indian. Um, I think your role models of how you get paid should be role models of the highest paid.
Makes sense.
Don't index yourself to the lowest baseline at all, ever. I mean, honestly, like I will give another example of where this was. This is again like really silly and very arrogant. But I look back on it somehow, like after my first internship on Wall Street, I looked at this white MD from Harvard who worked in municipals at that time. And I came back that summer to my boyfriend and I said, I want to make MD just like him at 27. Of course, no clue, no realism, like in my expectations, assumptions, no idea that I was Indian, blah, blah, blah. But guess what? That audacious goal of 27, I made MD probably at 32 or 33. And in between, I also happened to meet this amazing woman that was my boss who made MD at 27, actually. And she was Asian. So be very careful on who your role models are. Don't burn yourself out by shooting for the moon, like kind of just without any discretion. Obviously, have some thought and heart in it. Like that goal of 27 MD was actually, it burned me out. I wouldn't recommend that, but make sure that your baselines are diverse. You're looking at comp structures of everyone and not just women, not, you know what I mean?
It's such great advice. That is just such great advice for all of our listeners. I really I take that to heart, and I think it's really good, Nirupa. And
Thank you,
it's
Lisa.
it's why we do these podcasts. So all right. So what's the next step for you? What are we looking forward to? What are we going to hear about in 6 months to a year?
Actually, you know what? I will say this. I'm going to put a shameless plug. I would love to come back in 6 months to a year and talk about mentorship and sponsorship as well and advocacy. For me personally in my life right now, the next 7 years, transmuting the salons into the next chapter, and will be a business that makes profit, even though I said profit was a bad word, margins. And really looking forward to developing a product that works for the audience, and a product that works for the audience and in a market and naturally has a price. It'll work. You know what I mean? When those two meet,
Yep.
it works.
Yes.
The second, looking forward to dedicating more time to my writing career and being very serious about it. And then the third is investing. The biggest thing about investing is I am going to put a hold for this entire year and not add anything to my alternatives portfolio. And this is called a holding period, where I have to evaluate and monitor the portfolio, learn from my mistakes, learn from my victories for the last 7 years. I've made some big mistakes, and I've also had some great gains. So investing has been very binary for me, and I don't in what I invest in, not the stock market or bonds, but I want that to be less bimodal for the next 7 years. I want the curve to be smoother and the quality of returns to be better. And the last thing, I think the biggest change that will happen in my life will be where I live.
Where you live.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I already alluded to it. Like, it makes
Yep.
no sense for me to be living here
Yep.
for all the reasons. Yeah.
Good for you. Good for you.
Yeah.
All right. So here's the big question, the question we ask all of our guests. And we asked you this before, so I'm going to see how this actually jives with your last answer. Why is the power of the ask crucial to women, especially financially, Nirupa?
First off, I'll answer it like a writer. Women for centuries and beyond have been givers, that we need to reset the balance and be receivers. And asking equals receiving, as far as I'm concerned. And that's philosophical, but I think that from a mindset standpoint, I think we need to shift that toggle in our brain. We are going to be champion receivers as we have been champion givers. In fact, right size that balance. The second, on the power of the ask financially, I come from a country where the goddess of wealth is revered in every household, Lakshmi. Money is not a bad word in India. India is also a very poor country where money is a very important currency, and it's not vilified like it is here. So for every woman that is stumbling or is twisting her words on asking for money, I just want you to flip the switch and think about the goddess Lakshmi from India sitting next to you, and welcome in money as an energy flow that is sacred and that is life-giving, not just for you, but for your family and your larger family and your community, and for an equitable world.
Love that. I love that. Okay, I'm going to look up this goddess, because this.
I will send you a picture.
I was just going to ask you for a picture, because we're going to put it on social media for savvy ladies.
I will send you that picture. Actually, Lakshmi needs to be celebrated, because I think we need, one of the first projects, Lisa, for us is we need to de-vilify this. It's been really a very patriarchal construct that's been pushed on, that money is evil. It's been pushed on in classes of people that have not had access to it.
Yep.
We need to flip the equation on that.
Okay, I'm in with you on this. Send me the picture. We're going to get it posted. I really want to get it posted. So, Nirupa, as always, Precious and I thank you so much for coming to chat with us and doing the Power of the Ask podcast as you did before. We love having you. And for all of our listeners, please keep listening and subscribe, and comment and review and tell us what else you would love to hear about. And just keep listening and tell a friend, tell a friend, tell a friend. So thank you all.
Thank you so much, Lisa and Precious.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of The Power of the Ask, ladies.
Don't forget to like, review, and subscribe to spread the love with #PowerOfTheAsk.